Hi, everyone. So I wanted to do a visual walkthrough of this infographic, which is designed and written by Michelle Pacansky-Brock. She is the author of one of the texts that we are using in this course, and very much a big influence on the approach that we are taking to online teaching and learning in this class and throughout our OWI certification sequence. So I wanted to spend a little time walking through this for several reasons. First of all, because it is a really interesting example of a multimodal text. Multimodal texts we'll be learning more about soon are texts that combine visuals and text in various ways. So in this case, it's an infographic that does some pretty interesting things to combine words and pictures to create a kind of snapshot of the topic, how to humanize your online class. So I think it's a great example of a kind of multimodal instruction itself. It's also important because it does provide a kind of theoretical framework for this course and for our program. So I want to take a little bit of time to highlight a few things as I walk through this. And the final reason is because she used this tool called PictoChart. And if you're not familiar with it, you might go set up an account. It's just pictochart.com and see if you might want to use it in some ways in designing your own course materials or in creating an assignment for your imaginary students in the class. So a number of different reasons that I want to spend some time walking through this in a little video for you to just kind of highlight some things. It's a really important kind of point of reference to me, and I tend to look at it all the time as a way of thinking about what I'm doing in my own teaching. So when you first click the link, it brings up a page that looks like this, and there's this aqua blue button in the upper left-hand corner that says Show Presentation. And what that does is it converts the infographic to a sort of staged, animated, semi-animated presentation. So if you look at it here, you can see the whole thing all on one page. And you can see it includes these main sections. There's the What is Humanizing section at the top. Then there's Facilitation, Course Design, Learning Domains with the affective and cognitive learning pyramids from Benjamin Bloom. And then there's this note at the bottom about community of inquiry and some work cited. But if you click the Show Presentation button, it turns this into an animated presentation and sort of goes slide by slide. So let me just use this feature. I just click that button and now you can see it's expanded to full screen, and I can use my right and left arrow keys to tab through this. So this is How to Humanize Your Online Class by Michelle Pacansky-Brock. Now, I like this definition of humanizing, and I think it's very important in an online learning environment because, as you know, you're all taking online classes now. It's easy to feel kind of alone, isolated, and alienated. So if we think about humanizing our online classes and ways we can use multimedia to do that, it will help us with our teaching. So she defines humanized learning in the following way. Humanized learning increases the relevance of content and improves students' motivation to log in week after week. When students relate to an online instructor as something more than a subject matter expert and begin to conceive of themselves as part of a larger community, they are more likely to be motivated, be satisfied with their learning, and succeed in achieving the course objectives. And she cites a few works cited there from 2002 and 2003. Research in the following years after that has only confirmed that this is true, that middle part about when students relate to you and when they feel part of a community, they are more likely to be motivated, and actually they succeed. In fact, a tiny bit of engagement and rapport, as our own Dr. Heidi Harris has been researching, a little bit goes a long way. It makes a huge difference. So this humanizing, it's not just a warm, fuzzy, feel-good thing. It actually improves student outcomes. So there's a very important reason to focus on using multimedia to humanize your class, build instructor presence, and to create this sense of students feeling like they are part of a larger community. So think about, as you're reading through some of the readings for this week, how do you do that? What does that mean to say build an online community? How do you even do that as an instructor when you're designing a course? So that's her definition of humanizing. Now she breaks it down here into two parts, facilitation and course design. And these very nearly parallel our own course learning outcomes. We actually have a section in our course learning outcomes on course design. You can see on the bottom half of the screen here, she focuses on these 6 concepts that begin with the letter C: choice, control, constructing meaning, challenge, collaboration, and consequences. So those are 6 strategies that Pacansky-Brock articulates as a way to improve humanizing in our course design. Give students choice, allow them to express themselves through video, voice, and writing. Provide format and topic options for projects. That's just one example of the principles of course design. Collaboration, have students learn from each other. Consequences, turn students into content creators. So in a very small space here, she really articulates a series of strategies and principles for course design. So we will come back to this again when we begin talking in more depth in a couple weeks about course design and how that relates to multimedia. Then to go back up to the top, facilitation is very parallel to what we call presence and interaction. She actually uses the word presence in the left column there. Presence, don't be a robot. Create a lively welcome video. Provide feedback in audio or video format. In the middle, she talks about empathy. Sense when students need extra support. Be approachable. Check in with students individually. And then on the right, awareness. Know your students. Survey the students in week 1. Use a fun, low-risk icebreaker to get students connected and so forth. So again, she's combining principles, presence, empathy, and awareness in terms of learning facilitation with these very specific strategies, such as create a welcome video and survey students. So I think what she's doing here is really helpful because she suggests here's the concept, presence, and then here's how to do it. How do you not be a robot? Well, here's some strategies. So very useful practical tips from Michelle Pacansky-Brock here around facilitation and building community and presence in your classroom. So then we go to the next slide. This is learning domains. And some of you have probably heard of Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a very famous frame of reference. Benjamin Bloom was an educational researcher, educational psychologist. And as it says here, Bloom's taxonomy is frequently used as a helpful framework to understand how learning occurs. And on the left in the orange, we have what's called affective learning: attitudes, motivations, and values. And on the right, we have cognitive learning, which involves knowledge. And in both cases, we have a kind of pyramid where the base of the pyramid, in the case of cognitive learning, for example, is remembering. Do you remember what you learned? And then it moves from remembering to understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. The top of the pyramid is creation. So when a student gets to create something, such as a multimodal writing project, they learn and master the concepts in the most deepest way. Remembering is the baseline. You have to have some information first. And then as you move upward in the taxonomy toward analyzing, evaluating, and creating, you are not just remembering information, you are making it your own and taking ownership over it and creating your own meaning out of what you are learning. So that's why creating is at the top of the pyramid. And then in the parallel structure on the affective or emotional side, we have receiving. Willingness to become aware is the base. You have to be willing to become aware, right? You have to learn how to learn. You have to be willing to receive new information in order to learn on that cognitive, affective side. And then you move upward through responding, valuing, organizing, incorporating into a value system, and ultimately internalizing. You have really learned something deeply on an affective or emotional level when you identify with it, when you take it in and make it your own. So you can see how there's a parallel between creating on the cognitive side and internalizing on the affective side. So lots of people have built on this Benjamin Bloom framework, the Bloom's taxonomy, over the years, but it still forms a kind of baseline framework for how we understand the learning process in terms of both cognition and affective learning. So she's connecting that and offering it as a kind of framework for the way she's thinking about humanizing online learning in her own work. And then the last framework we have here in terms of research and sort of scholarly framework is called Community of Inquiry, or COI. And you can see Community of Inquiry includes these 3 different spheres of thinking: social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence, which are defined over here to the right. And as she explains in her slide Community of inquiry is a theoretical framework that educators may leverage to understand how to develop and assess deep, meaningful learning experiences. The three elements are social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence. So you can go back and read that in more detail later. But community of inquiry is a kind of strand of research and scholarship that has been very influential in the field of online literacy education, because we do so much with collaboration. So community of inquiry is a useful strategy, useful framework for thinking about how do you build this kind of learning community in your online classroom. Here's her copyright notice, which is actually not a copyright notice at all, but a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0. Look that up if you're not familiar with what that means. And then here's her list of works cited. So that's a walkthrough of Pacansky-Brock's wonderful presentation on how to humanize your online class. I encourage you to spend some time with it and really come back to it multiple times and use it as a point of reference and almost as a kind of checklist for your evaluating your own work throughout the course. I think it's a really great example and something that I tend to come back to as a touchstone time and time again. Okay, thanks for listening.